Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to dive into something, I think we all struggle with, procrastination.
Hmm.
And it always seems to bring along its friend, fear.
It really does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we've all been there, right? You know that feeling when you just can't seem to get started on something, even when you know you need to?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it feels like fear's always lurking in the shadows, like it's the real reason behind those delays.
Yeah, totally. And it can make you feel like you're the only one struggling with this. But actually, these sources we're looking at today, they show just how common these feelings are. I mean, they all approach procrastination and fear from different perspectives, but they all agree it's a universal experience.
Well, it's not just us. That's good to know, I guess. But where do we even begin to untangle this mess?
Well, let's start with James Clear, his book, Atomic Habits.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Well, he has this interesting idea about how our habits actually shape our identity, not the other way around.
Hmm, that's kind of a mind bender. So it's not that we are a certain way and therefore we have certain habits, but our habits actually create who we are.
Exactly. He says every action we take is like casting a vote for the type of person we want to become.
Okay, I'm starting to see where he's going with this.
Yeah.
So like, if I want to be a more, I don't know, let's say a more decisive person, I have to start making decisions more often, even small ones.
Yeah, exactly. You have to start acting like that decisive person, even if you don't feel like it at first.
Okay, so I have to fake it till I make it.
Well, it's more like act it till you become it. It's about showing up as the person you want to be rather than waiting for it to magically happen someday.
I like that. So how do we, actually put this into practice? Like, where do we even start?
Well, Clear offers this really helpful framework in his book. It's called The Four Laws of Behavior Change.
4 laws. Okay, I'm listening.
So, to create a good habit or break a bad one, you need to make the desired behavior obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do you make, let's say, working on a huge, boring project attractive? That doesn't sound very appealing to me.
Well, that's where you have to get creative. One technique Clear suggests is habit stacking.
Habit stacking, what's that?
So, let's say you love listening to music, right? You could try starting your work session with your favorite playlist, something that really pumps you up. You basically link a new habit, like working on that project, to an existing habit that you already enjoy.
Ooh, so you're kind of tricking your brain into associating something you dread with something you love.
Exactly. You're making it more appealing, more attractive, and therefore easier to start.
That's pretty clever. But what about breaking bad habits? Like, how do I stop myself from constantly checking social media?
Well, for breaking bad habits, Clear suggests making the behavior invisible and difficult. So in this case, you might try deleting those tempting apps from your phone, or at least logging out of your accounts, so you're not constantly bombarded by those notifications.
Out of sight, out of mind. Right.
Exactly. It's like putting those cookies you're trying to avoid on the highest shelf in the pantry. Or even better, not buying them at all.
Okay, so Clear's all about understanding how our habits shape us,
Yeah.
and then using that knowledge to create new habits or break old ones. But what about that fear factor we were talking about earlier? Where does that fit into all of this?
Right. Well, another source we have here, Michael Pilarczyk, he takes a different approach in his book, Master Your Mindset. He draws inspiration from high-achieving athletes to show how we can overcome fear and achieve big things.
Okay, like who?
He talks about Usain Bolt, the world's fastest man.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Well, Pilarczyk emphasizes how Bolt transformed his desire to be the fastest into an absolute must. It wasn't just a wish, it was a burning necessity for him.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. So it's about finding that same level of drive for our own goals, right?
Right.
But how do you do that when it's something like, I don't know, finishing a work presentation, not winning Olympic gold?
It all starts with connecting to your why, as both Pilarczyk and Simon Sinek emphasize. Sinek even wrote a whole book about it called Start With Why.
I've definitely heard of that one. It's about finding your purpose, right?
Exactly. When you connect your goals to a deeper meaning, when you understand why something is truly important to you, the effort and the discomfort along the way become worthwhile. It becomes more about aligning your actions with your values rather than just trying to avoid a task you don't like.
It's like finding that spark that ignites your motivation.
Yeah.
Right, that makes sense. But what about those times when, you know your why, you have all these techniques, but fear still creeps in and just paralyzes you? What do you do then?
Well, that's where understanding the biological root of fear can be helpful. Russ Harris, in his book The Happiness Trap, explains that when we're faced with something that makes us anxious or fearful, our primitive fight or flight response gets triggered.
Oh, yeah, like our caveman instincts kicking in, right?
Yeah. Right. Our bodies are basically trying to protect us from a perceived threat. But, in today's world, it's not always a saber-toothed tiger we're running from. It might just be a challenging project or a difficult conversation.
So our bodies are reacting the same way to a deadline as they would to, like, an actual physical danger.
Yeah, in a way, it's like we're hardwired to avoid anything that feels threatening, even if it's not a real threat.
So procrastination is actually a survival mechanism. That's fascinating, but not very helpful when you're trying to get things done. So what can we do about it?
Well, Harris suggests using mindfulness techniques to help manage this fight or flight response.
Mindfulness. Okay, so like meditation and stuff.
It can include meditation, but it's more about consciously acknowledging your thoughts and feelings without judgment, just noticing them and letting them be there without getting swept away by them.
So instead of freaking out and running away from the task, you just kind of observe the fear and keep going.
Exactly. Mindfulness helps you create a space between your thoughts and your actions, so you're not just reacting automatically to every fear-based thought that pops up.
It's like you're hitting the pause button before reacting.
Mm.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and that pause can be really empowering. It gives you a chance to choose a different response, even when fear is present. You're not letting fear control you, you're taking back control.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. We've got habits, mindset, and now mindfulness. It's like a multi-pronged approach to tackling procrastination and fear. But are there any other angles we should be considering?
Oh, absolutely. We've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore here. All right, so we've talked about the why, the what. Now let's get into the how. What can we actually do to, like, kick procrastination to the curb?
Right. Because it's one thing to understand the problem, but it's another thing entirely to, actually change our behavior.
Exactly. And that's where these sources get really interesting. They offer a bunch of different techniques and strategies, and some of them are, well, they're pretty unexpected.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me. What kind of unexpected strategies are we talking about?
Well, let's go back to Atomic Habits for a second. Remember Clear's 4 laws of behavior change?
Yeah. Make it obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying.
Right. Well, one technique he suggests is called implementation intentions. It's basically about getting super specific about when and where you're going to do something. Like, no more vague promises to yourself.
So instead of saying, oh, I'll work on that project later, I'd say, I'll work on the project for 1 hour tomorrow morning at my desk right after I have my coffee.
Exactly. You're removing any ambiguity. You're making a clear commitment to yourself. It sounds simple, but it really increases your chances of following through.
It's kind of like setting a date with yourself.
Yeah.
Right? And you wouldn't stand someone up, especially not yourself.
I love that analogy. And this actually connects really well with what Michael Pilarczyk talks about in Master Your Mindset.
You mean about transforming wants into musts, right? Like that thing we were talking about with Usain Bolt, how he was so driven to be the fastest.
Exactly. He wasn't messing around. It was a must for him,
Sure.
He was willing to put in the work, the discipline, the sacrifice because his desire was so strong.
But how do we, like regular people, cultivate that kind of must-have mindset for our everyday goals? I mean,
Hmm.
winning a race is one thing, but finishing a report for work,
Yeah.
that doesn't quite have the same, urgency.
Well, that's where connecting to your why comes in, that deeper purpose behind your actions.
Right, like Simon Sinek talks about.
Exactly. When you have a deep personal reason for achieving something, the effort, the discomfort, it all becomes worthwhile. It's no longer just a chore, it's a step towards something bigger.
Okay, I'm getting that.
Hmm.
But even with a strong why, sometimes those negative thoughts creep in, like, I'm not good enough, or what if I fail? How do we deal with those?
Ugh. The dreaded inner critic. We've all got one, right?
Mine's pretty vocal, actually.
Mine too. But here's the thing. You don't have to believe everything your inner critic says. It's like those thoughts. They're just thoughts. They're not facts.
So how do we, quiet that voice down?
Well, a lot of the techniques we've already talked about can help, like mindfulness, for example.
Mm.
When you practice mindfulness, you learn to observe those thoughts without judgment. You acknowledge them, but you don't let them control you.
So it's about creating that space between the thought and the reaction,
Hmm.
right? Like hitting that pause button before spiraling into a pit of self-doubt.
Exactly. And remember, this isn't about pretending those thoughts don't exist. It's about choosing how you respond to them.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah.
But sometimes I think the fear is less about, my own self-doubt and more about the actual task itself. Like, what if it's just really hard or overwhelming?
Well, in those cases, it can be helpful to break the task down into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Yeah.
Bite-sized pieces that feel less intimidating.
So instead of looking at the whole mountain, I focus on taking one step at a time.
Exactly. And that's something that's emphasized in a lot of these sources. It's about focusing on the process, not just the outcome, and celebrating those small wins along the way.
I like that. It's like giving yourself little rewards as you go, kind of like training a puppy.
Right. And speaking of rewards, remember what we were saying about habit stacking?
Yeah, linking a new habit to something you already enjoy.
Well, that can also be a great way to reward yourself for tackling those challenging tasks. Like, let's say you've been putting off cleaning your desk.
Ugh, tell me about it.
Well, what if you told yourself that after you finish cleaning, you can watch an episode of your favorite show or call a friend?
Ooh, now that's motivating. Suddenly cleaning my desk doesn't sound so bad.
Exactly. You're using that anticipation of something enjoyable to push yourself through the task you've been avoiding.
This is all making a lot of sense, but I'm also realizing that there's no, like, one-size-fits-all solution.
Oh, definitely not. It's about finding what works for you, what resonates with your personality and your specific challenges.
So it's like having a toolbox full of different tools and you can choose the right one for the job.
Exactly. And the more tools you have in your toolbox, the better equipped you'll be to handle whatever obstacles come your way.
This is awesome. I'm feeling so much more empowered already.
Yeah.
But we've talked a lot about the practical side of things.
Hmm.
What about the bigger picture? How does all of this connect to living a more fulfilling life?
So we've talked a lot about the nitty-gritty of procrastination and fear. But I think it's important to step back for a second and look at, the bigger picture. Like, how does all of this connect to actually living a better life?
Right. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about getting things done. It's about, living a life that feels meaningful, a life that we're excited about.
Exactly. And that's where I think these sources offer some really powerful insights. Like, one key takeaway for me is that conquering procrastination and fear isn't just about being more productive. It's about living with intention.
Living with intention. I like that. So it's about making choices that are in line with our values, with what truly matters to us.
Exactly. And that takes us back to, Simon Sinek in his book, Start With Why. Remember how we emphasize the importance of connecting with your why, that deeper purpose behind everything you do?
Yeah, yeah. He said that when you start with why, everything else falls into place.
Right. And when your actions are aligned with your purpose, well, they just naturally become more meaningful. You're no longer just going through the motions. You're actually, creating a life that reflects what you truly care about.
It's like you're living a life that's true to yourself, not just a life that's dictated by fear or, by what other people expect of you.
Exactly. And that brings us to another important theme that emerges from these sources, the idea of embracing discomfort as an opportunity for growth.
Ooh, yeah. Like I'm thinking about David Goggins and his pretty extreme approach in Can't Hurt Me.
Oh, yeah, he definitely took it to the next level. But I think the underlying message there is something that we can all apply to our lives in some way.
Like that we grow the most when we step outside of our comfort zones,
Yeah.
when we challenge ourselves, even when it feels a little scary.
Exactly. It's like that saying, everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear. If we're constantly trying to avoid discomfort, well, we're also avoiding the opportunity to grow and expand our potential.
So it's not about eliminating discomfort altogether. It's about, learning how to navigate it, how to be okay with it, and even maybe embrace it.
Right. Because discomfort is just a part of life.
Yeah.
There will always be challenges, setbacks, things that make us feel uneasy. But it's how we respond to those challenges that really matters.
And that's where those mindfulness techniques that Russ Harris talks about can be so helpful, right?
Totally. By learning to observe our thoughts and feelings without judgment, we can create a space between those feelings and our actions. We don't have to be ruled by them.
It's like we're hitting that pause button again, giving ourselves a chance to choose a more intentional response, even when things feel tough.
Exactly. And that brings us to another powerful idea from Carol Dweck's mindset, the idea of cultivating a growth mindset.
Right, right. She talks about how it's so important to believe that our abilities can be developed, that we're not fixed or limited.
Yeah. It's about seeing challenges as opportunities to learn and grow rather than as threats to our ego. And that shift in perspective can make a huge difference in how we approach any obstacle in our lives.
Instead of getting discouraged by setbacks, we can see them as valuable learning experiences.
Exactly. It's about approaching life with a sense of curiosity and a willingness to learn and grow rather than getting stuck in that fixed mindset of, I can't do this or I'm not good enough.
So it's about being open to new possibilities, to constantly evolving and becoming a better version of ourselves.
Absolutely. And remember, it's not just about achieving those big, ambitious goals. It's also about those smaller moments of joy and accomplishment along the way.
Like Sanjay Lubomirsky talks about in The How of Happiness, right? The importance of savoring those positive experiences.
Yes, she reminds us that intentionally savoring those moments, big or small, can really boost our happiness and resilience.
So it's about pausing to appreciate a delicious meal, a beautiful sunset, a meaningful conversation. It's about being present and soaking in those positive emotions.
Exactly. And by practicing savoring regularly, we're not just increasing our happiness in the moment, we're actually training our brains to focus on the positive. And that can be so helpful when we inevitably face challenges.
It's like we're building a mental reservoir of positivity that we can draw on when things get
I
tough.
love that analogy, and it's something that we can all do no matter what our circumstances are.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that it's not just about getting things done. It's about living a life that feels truly meaningful and fulfilling. A life that's driven by purpose, not by fear.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's about embracing challenges as opportunities for growth, savoring the good moments, and, just being kind to ourselves along the way.
And remembering that we have the power to create the life we want.
It's not always easy, but it's definitely worth the effort.
Absolutely. So until next time, keep exploring, keep growing, and keep diving deeper. Happy diving, everyone.